Hello and welcome to the 2020 Sizzling Summer Series, sponsored by the UNMC College of Public Health Office of Public Health Practice. And we couldn't do this without our partners on this series, the Midwestern Public Health Training Center, the Nebraska Association of Local Health Directors, and the Nebraska Business Development Center at the University of Nebraska at Omaha. My name is Katie Brandert. I'm the Manager of Workforce Development and Leadership Programs in the Office of Public Health Practice at UNMC, and I am your host for this series. This summer series focuses on the strategic skill set of change management. Over the months of June, July, and August, we are hosting the three-part series, offering one part each month. And today, we are focused on part 2, change and the individual. Before I turn it over to our speaker, a few logistics. We ask that you keep yourself muted on today's call, except when we go into breakout rooms. We will want you to be talking to your breakout partners then. If you have any questions for our speaker, feel free to put those into the chat box anytime during the call. I'll be monitoring that. And if you experience any technical difficulties during the call, please feel free to send me a private chat and I'll support you if I can. We are recording today's webinar and the slides from today will be posted along with that recording. If you would like to take notes on today's call, you'll find a file in the chat box that you can download. It's a notes page designed to help you follow along on the call today, and I'll put it in there one more time here after I complete this opening. Both the recordings and the slides will be made available. A link to the evaluation will follow this call, and evaluation data will be used to inform the content for the next call in this series and for quality improvement overall and reporting purposes to our funders. So we thank you in advance for your feedback in that evaluation. I'm excited about our speaker for this series, Michael Purdun. Michael is well practiced at managing change. He is a teacher, a speaker on change management, project management, and team building through the Nebraska Business Development Center. And he leads a cybersecurity team at the Omaha Public Power District. But before his current life in IT, Michael was one of us. He was a public healther. He worked for Omaha Healthy Kids Alliance, and he's currently the board president of MilkWorks, which is a nonprofit community breastfeeding center in Nebraska. Michael is a trainer, facilitator, father, partner, instructor at the University of Nebraska, Omaha. The list could go on, soccer fan. Thanks for joining us, Michael. Take it away.
Thank you very much. Well, welcome everybody to the second part of our Leading Change series. So back in June, it seems like forever ago, but it's only been 4 weeks. We kind of talked about changing the individual, and so today we're really going to talk about how we lead change in small groups, and I'm going to share with you guys kind of a tool that I use when I'm working with small teams and leaders of small groups. And so I want to get everybody started just like we did last month. With some introductions. You are going to be working in a small group, so this is a great opportunity. You're going to stay with this small group most likely for the time, and so this is an opportunity to get introductions made and share a change that your small group is working on right now. What's kind of top of mind for you, and what brings you into the room today, and make sure that we're all kind of on the same page and engaged. So Katie is going to kick you off to breakout rooms, and we'll give you about 5 minutes to make introductions to each other. Awesome. Well, welcome back. Hopefully you all had an opportunity to introduce yourselves. I believe, right, we've got to self-disclose a little bit to kind of have that opportunity to kind of get a little bit deeper than the surface level. So hopefully you had an opportunity to do that. You're going to get to meet those people again that you were in breakout rooms with one more time later on. So remember who they were. So as we talk about kind of leading change, most often as leaders we fail with change because we want to try to control it all. Right. So as leaders, a lot of us got to our leadership position because we're pretty good at organizing things. We're pretty good at making sure work gets done. We're really good at, kind of driving results, right? I mean, that's That's what our leadership looks for. And the irony is that once you get into leadership, now you have to learn how to dial that back, because what got you into that role isn't going to be what you need for the next position that you get, right? And so a lot of times I talk to leaders that are coming up in organizations and talk to them about, are we trying to overpower the change that we're trying to see within the organization or within our small teams? And so one of the ways that I really encourage leaders, especially new leaders, to look at is the peer coaching model. And for me, I think this is a great tool for our toolbox, no matter where we're at in the organization. And within my group, I had an opportunity to kind of talk about that. So it's a good moment for me to kind of pause and say, when I'm talking about leadership, I'm not talking about HR has designated us a direct supervisor of individuals, and we're now responsible for approving timesheets and doing performance evaluations and kind of all of that nonsense. I'm talking about leadership, right? How do we lead teams and people to accomplish more than they could have on their own, right? Because that's really, at the end of the day, a sign of a good leader. If you were to leave people alone and they would have accomplished what you would have had them accomplish on their own, were you worthwhile? Did you do a good enough job? I think as leaders, we should be force multipliers for the teams that we're a part of and help them achieve more than they could have. And so peer coaching is one of the things that is one of the tools that I use a lot and I advocate for. And so let's talk about what that means. So peer coaching is really kind of this process of coming together as two individuals, two peers, in order to, kind of reflect and help each other guide towards an acceptable result, right? And so when we come together as a peer group and we agree that we're not going to be hierarchical, right? Even if I'm coming to maybe somebody who is more senior than I am in the organization, if I come to them as a peer, it's not because I'm seeking for them to give me the direction. I'm looking for somebody to help ask me the right questions, to guide me to what's already there in my mind, and to help me role play out maybe some of the ways that those conversations may go, so that I'm better prepared for those conversations when they come up, right? Or maybe I'm dealing with something at work that I can't really articulate very well on my own, and I'm really struggling with. Maybe that opportunity to kind of bounce ideas off of somebody else helps me kind of jar loose some of the things that were already pre-existing there. And so I'm not looking for advice. I'm not looking for somebody to set out a vision and say, well, we'll go and do these 5 things. I'm looking for somebody to ask me the questions to help guide me on that journey towards maybe a solution that I'm really invested in. And I want to see a positive outcome for. And so when we talk about peer coaching, we talk about a process, because as you guys will learn, you're going to have an opportunity to practice. This is a lot of work, right? And we're going to kind of talk throughout that today. There's a lot of work when you decide to take on this kind of peer coaching mindset. And so having a process is great for us to have that foundation. And so as I think about the process, I really talk about these 7 steps, right? So the first step is presenting the topic, right? So as we come into a peer coaching situation, and that may be set up and formal, where we have an ongoing session that's happening. That may be informal, where somebody comes to me and they're not looking for a peer coach, but maybe I use my peer coaching knowledge to help guide them to an answer. Right? So we're going to present a topic, right? So an example that we'll use today is I'm kind of nervous about a conversation that I have to have with my boss, right? There's something that I have to approach them about that is a critical conversation that I have to have, right? So as a peer coach, I'm gonna reflect that topic back to them and say, okay, what I heard that you want to work on today is this, right? Did I hear that correctly? Right? And that second step is we're going to listen and ask really good open-ended questions, right? So I'm going to listen to what they're telling me, and I'm going to ask them open-ended questions to help guide them down that journey of where they want to get to, right? So if we take that example of that conversation with my boss, I may go, well, tell me about what that conversation you're looking to get out of that. What's the topic that you need help with? And why are you nervous about it? What do you think your boss is going to say, right? So we're going to ask them some open, probing questions to get them to move down and expose and talk through some of that baggage that's there, right? What, you know, if we weren't worried about it, we would just walk in their office and ask them, right? So an opportunity maybe to flesh out some of those things. Number 3 is we're going to look for commitment, because the difference between us laying on the couch, you know, in a counseling session and a peer coaching session is the commitment that we're looking for, right? So as a peer coach, when I hear somebody say, well, you know what, you know, I think that's a really good approach to that conversation. I'm going to ask them, well, when do you think that you're going to have that conversation? When do you think you'll be ready? What's left that you have to prepare for? Right, so we're going to look for commitment, because as a peer coach, what I can do is help create accountability in that other person, right? Step number 4 is we're going to clarify, we're going to clarify what we heard. We're going to clarify what they said to us. We're going to clarify what they committed to at every step along that journey to make sure that what you've heard as a peer coach is what they've said, right? Because the difference between what was said and what was heard sometimes can be an ocean between us. And so we want to make sure that what they're saying is getting the message across, right? So if I'm peer coaching somebody who's nervous about a conversation with their boss, I want to help them articulate exactly what they want to say and what they want that other person to take away from that conversation. Step number 5 is we're going to help them anticipate breakdowns, right? So one of the great things that I can do as a peer coach is provide an objective stance on that conversation. What do you think your boss is going to say to you when you approach them with this topic? Well, how do you think they're going to react to that, right? Well, how might that go differently than what you expect, right? And so I can help, from a peer coaching standpoint, help anticipate some of those roadblocks and some of those possible scenarios, right? So as me as an individual sitting and playing out this conversation with my boss, I'm gonna probably get stuck in a rut pretty quickly, right? I'm gonna assume it's gonna go this way, and I'm gonna play it out that way probably to the nth degree. What a peer coach can help me do is pull me back from kind of that, those racing thoughts, right? If I'm anxious about that conversation, and help me lay out a series of scenarios that may play out and help me be prepared enough for any of them, right? So that when I walk into that conversation, if it doesn't go the one way that I planned it to go, I'm not a nervous wreck because it didn't go the way that I thought it did. I've got a little bit of planning done on maybe 3 or 4 different ways that conversation could go. So I'm going to help, as a peer coach, anticipate those breakdowns, right? That 6th step is summarize, right? Again, just like we did during the session and clarifying at every step, we're going to summarize at the end. Well, so this is what we talked about today. This is what I heard you say. This is what I heard you commit to. Is that correct, right? And the final step is the most important step of all, because if I let that person walk away from the peer coaching conversation without making sure that they know exactly when I'm going to follow up with them, then we've lost all that accountability. So I'm going to make sure in step number 7 that they know exactly when I'm going to follow up with them. And then as a peer coach, it's now my responsibility to make sure that I do that, right? So what I heard is you're going to have a conversation with your boss next Friday because that's your next one-on-one with them. Do you mind if I follow up with you in the afternoon on that Friday to see how that conversation went? Immediately, we've now created that accountability because we've talked about exactly what's going to happen. I've agreed to it, right? In the peer coaching conversation, that solution was mine. It wasn't the peer coach's. I came up with it, right? So I can't wiggle my way out and say, well, that was really what you wanted me to do. I don't know if I would handle it that way. No, as a peer coach, I didn't have any skin in that game, right? You came up with that idea. You played out the scenarios and planned for each of them. I just helped you along the way. What I'm going to do now is you said you were going to have that conversation at this time. I'm going to help you keep yourself accountable. right? So I'm going to follow up with you and see how it went, because not as a babysitting exercise, because I'm excited. I'm invested now, right? I heard about all the things that may go wrong. I want to know how the conversation actually went. And so we want to create that accountability, and we want to build that relationship in this peer coaching dyad. And the follow-up is the most important thing. I've peer coached with people who've missed the follow-up, and it really deflates the relationship, because that is, as we walk away from that conversation, I know that I have somebody else who's going to ask me about that. And if they call me up and I weaseled my way out of it, and I said, I thought I was going to have that conversation, but I didn't. I chickened out. The first thing my peer coach is going to ask me, when's the next opportunity that you're going to have that conversation? Because they're going to continue to hold me accountable, right? Because if it's something that's weighing on me as a peer coach, part of my role is to help you work through that, right? And so if it's still something there, I may ask, well, is that a problem anymore? Do you feel like you need to have that conversation? Maybe things have changed. Maybe you didn't have it because, they addressed a situation in a different way, which is fantastic. That's great. But if not, if that's still something that you have to work on, then when are you going to have that conversation? All right, so I get asked a lot, well, what's the difference between coaching and mentoring then, right? And so for me, they're both very important relationships to have within your personal and professional lives, but they serve very different purposes, right? So coaching is about that guided discovery journey. It's very task-oriented, so think about it, right? I have a conversation with my boss that I need to have. That's very task-oriented, right? It's not about building a long-term relationship with somebody who is going to help me along my career path, right? Which is very valuable. But within the peer coaching setting, I need somebody to help me with this task. This is what's on my mind today. Can you help me with this thing, right? It's short-term, and I say that in that the peer coaching relationship may be long-term, and you may find peer coaches that you work with throughout your career, and maybe you come back to people at different times, but it's short-term in its focus, right? In terms of that conversation next Friday that I'm gonna have. Not the, by the next 18 months, I wanna be at this point in my career, right? It's how'd that conversation go that you were gonna have this week, right? And I'm looking for somebody with coaching specific knowledge, right? So if you think about a mentor, I'm looking for somebody who can provide me advice. I want to be able to go to somebody who has been on a career path similar to mine, and who maybe has a worldview that's similar to mine, and has that domain specific knowledge, right? So I'm looking for somebody who I can model myself after. In my coaching experience, I'm looking for somebody who's a good coach, to ask good questions. I want somebody who can help guide me. And sometimes it's almost better if they don't work in the same field as you, because now they're less likely to put their experience onto me, right? So as I walk in to a peer coaching session for you guys, maybe my experience with far less public health experience than any of you guys have, maybe that helps me as a peer coach, because I'm less likely to jump to that advice giving step where I want to say, well, this is how I handled it, right? What have you thought about doing it this way? And for me as the individual on the other side, as kind of the person seeking coaching, that's hard, because if somebody gives you advice and you don't take it, that puts that relationship in an awkward perspective. And so we want to be, as coaches, we want to be aware of any time we're providing advice or guidance, because we want to make sure that person understands where that advice and that guidance is coming from, and that it's okay for them to say no, that advice won't work for them. All right, and so the next step is we've got to listen with care, right? And this is the hardest part of the peer coaching process that you guys are going to go through, right? We talk a lot about how listening is so hard, and we're going to ask you guys to do that here coming up. And so the advice that I will give you is listen with care, concentrate, ask good questions, recap, and express interest, express general interest. Because if we're sitting in a conversation and somebody is uninterested, we immediately know, right? So be interested in the topic that somebody is talking about, right? Get somebody to elaborate on why they're nervous about that, right? Why that's important to them. And expressing interest in those ways gets people to open up in very, very authentic ways. And so what I will say for you that are, maybe this is your first time or you're still new to this, have a piece of paper near you. So as you're listening and a question comes in your mind, you can jot it down, because it is very hard to both listen and keep the question in mind that you're thinking of asking next. If we're trying to do both of those, then we're going to fail at one. And so we're going to either forget the question or forget what they were talking about and miss something. And so I will say, keep paper nearby you and jot down that question, or jot down a little note so that triggers you to remember that question. All right, and so we'll talk about the two approaches to coaching. So a lot of people come into this, and I talk about peer coaching, and they say, well, gosh, how do I get to those results? We're talking about leading change through this peer coaching model. How do I get there, right? My conversations are kind of lighthearted and they're not super regimented, and I'm getting a hard time getting accountability created. One thing I'll say is, be kind to yourself. This is a process that you'll build into and that you'll get more accustomed to. So start at the pal side. Start with informal conversations, right? Just make it casual. Don't make it this big ordeal about what peer coaching is and what that means and what you're doing and bringing all that baggage to the conversation, because that gets people really nervous, right? So if I approach somebody and they've never heard of peer coaching and I sit down with them and say, hey, I want to peer coach with you, they may go, whoa, that sounds really weird. I'm not interested. But if I just say, hey, you know what, I've got some things that I'm trying to work on. Would you be open to, just sitting down and connecting, about topics every once in a while? I really value your opinion. Who's going to say no to that? Right. And then maybe in the terms of that conversation, I can pass along some material about peer coaching. And I say, this is a way that I like to have these conversations. And so if you can help me by asking good questions, that would help me, kind of think about that. And if you start there, eventually you'll get better and better at it, to where you can start to dig below the surface and you can really challenge some of the things that are there and turn it into a regular practice. All right, so we're gonna give you guys a time to practice, because I can't imagine being in a session like this and not having an opportunity to practice something like this. And so we're going to give you guys each an opportunity to practice being a peer coach. You should be going into groups of 3, and it sounds like from Katie's note that I'll be included in that group of 3. So I'm really excited because it's a thing I miss most about these. And so you're going to each kind of take a 5-minute session, and you're going to be, one person will be the coach, one person will be the peer, and then one person will observe the 2 of them. And then we'll rotate through every 5 minutes each of those roles. And so that should give everybody an opportunity just to dig at it a little bit and get used to maybe how the process works. So I want to debrief and give you guys a chance to kind of talk about, what were your thoughts? So as you observed the 2 folks going, what did you see? And then when you were in either of the roles, how did that feel? So kind of jump in the chat and kind of, give us a couple of thoughts about where you were. And then we're gonna talk about just a couple of things to wrap up, and then we'll go from there.
I can share. I did peer coaching several years ago as part of the Great Plains Leadership Institute, and since then have gotten out of practice with my peer coaching, and so it was a good refresher of how useful it can be.
I'm glad. I will say, Katie and I talked after the last session about it's good for us to be reminded of practices, because sometimes when we go through a leadership exercise like that, there are 100 tools that you're given, and you don't know how to use them all, and maybe you don't need all of those tools at that point in your journey, right? If we were woodworkers at the start of our woodworking experience, we would not have, a garage full of tools. We would have a couple that we would learn how to use, but at some point we need to learn how to use them all. And so it's good to be reminded of that. So excellent. Thank you for sharing. Any other thoughts?
I really thought it was a valuable point about making sure that you're peer coaching somebody that maybe is apart from the work that you're doing. I felt like I was able to ask a lot better questions because I was just really naturally curious. I didn't know I had to get a lot of more context.
Yeah, and I think it's such a great point. Like, a lot of times we don't think about asking somebody who isn't around our work, right? And sometimes it's almost as if they can help us more than somebody who's mired in the muck with us. Sometimes it's great to be able to like step back and ask somebody who's totally unfamiliar with it. I can't tell you the number of times that like I've gone to somebody who's unfamiliar with it and they're like, I don't understand why that's an issue. And it puts it into perspective of like, sometimes we all get wrapped up in our own, world, and so to be asked to like take a step back and go, you know what, you're probably right. I'm probably adding maybe more to it than is there. I will share from my group. One of the things was I would encourage you guys to listen for kind of action words. So as your peer is speaking and as they're talking about their topic, listen for action words. So one of the things that Rebecca said in our group is that she's looking for permission from somebody else. And so for me, as I'm coaching, I'm looking for words like that, because that there's more there. So then my follow-up to her was about, well, why is that permission important? And then how will you obtain that permission? What's the plan? Okay, who else do you need to talk to put that plan together, right? So just tying in and kind of locking on to those action words gives you a thread to go down to say, why, okay, you said that there's something keeping you from accomplishing that, and it's this permission, and insert whatever word here, right? And so look for those words as your peer coaching. Those are great opportunities to kind of tie in on the things that are happening below the surface, right?
Dorothy, it was harder than you thought it would be. Yes, and what I will say is that it is hard and is uncomfortable the first several times that you do it. I think having that practice is the great part of it. And Ellen, yes, it's hard not to give advice, because that's like, we're so trained, we're so ingrained to like, here's what I would do, right? But really, when you take that away as a tool that you can use, it's amazing. It's amazing to see how the relationship changes and the interactions change, right? When you're not just like giving somebody advice and kind of sending them along their way. So absolutely. And being a better listener, Hannah, that's amazing. I think that is, to me, I think being a better listener, you realize how hard it is to like listen. And I don't mean that in like how hard it is to listen to people like go on and on, but just like for us, you have all the distractions and everything else going on in your mind, and distractions up on your screen right now, but just really focus in on like, what is this person saying? Where do they need to go? Where do they want to go next? And ask them the right question to get them there, right? I mean, it's so empowering. So
I want to be cognizant of your guys' time, and I know we're coming up to the top of the hour, and so I will just say I love this topic, and Katie and I sit on here after you all leave and kind of geek out on all of this stuff. And so it's awesome to be able to kind of talk with all of you guys and share this. And I hope that Maggie, you're right, that this is a practice that we can come back to for a lot of us. And if it's your first time, I will challenge you to, in the next 30 days, have a peer coaching conversation, right? And so one of the things I'm going to ask you to do before you leave is, in the chat box, make a commitment to the group on what you're going to commit to in the next 30 days, because we're going to see each other in August when we talk about the organization. And so let's see what your commitments are, because I couldn't let you go without holding you accountable. You guys are very shy on the chat box. All right, so my commitment is around, I've got to do I've got to commit to a date, not like a date, but for a strategic planning session. I love that, Caitlin. Reach out to a peer coach. Yeah, that's awesome. All right. Well, thank you guys very much. I'm a firm believer that your time is your most valuable resource. And so thank you for spending an hour with us today. And I appreciate it. And I hope that this is helpful as you think about, kind of leading change within small groups. The peer coaching model, I think, is a great way to help small groups work through change, and do it in a way where you as a leader within that small group aren't impressing your vision onto the group. You're helping the group determine what the vision should be and what the commitments are. So thank you very much. Loved the conversation today.
Thank you so much, Michael. And thanks to everybody for attending the Sizzling Summer Series Part 2. We hope you will join us either August 11th or August 25th for Part 3, Change and the Organization. And again, thank you so much for completing the evaluation for the call, which will be sent sometime in the next 24 hours or so. Thanks, everybody. Happy Tuesday.